Club Nook makes £809,000 in its first year, and after creditors were paid, it was left with just under £500,000. That was from the company accounts. And this company was basically licensing trademark registered names for products including beer, spirits, greeting cards, clothing, calendars, biscuits, and so on. That's potentially. So where did that money come from?
The money came from exactly that, from
products.
Not from products. It came from using his intellectual property.
Right, but where did the actual revenue come from?
As a private company.
But what was the revenue from?
From his assets, from his family trust.
What do you mean?
And from appearances that he made, and other things where he was occasionally paid for those activities.
Right. So Hannah, were you involved in this, in the Club Nook business? So, because you were asked by the Times where the money had come from, and you didn't answer. Just to clarify, where that income, that 800,000, what can you be more specific?
It's not something that we want to talk about because it's at the end of the day it's our private.
It's a lot of money,
income.
Though.
It's a lot of money, but we also have several businesses, and I think that we shouldn't.
But this one was set up specifically to trademark your father's name.
Yeah, and other business opportunities.
Right.
And
but where has that money gone?
But those are not all entirely related to Captain Tom. There are other businesses that we have.
Right, but you know, the reason I'm asking is obvious, is that people will think that you've used your father's name in Club Nook Limited to trademark products and you've kept the money. Is that true?
No.
I'm presuming all the revenue that came into that has come from trademark products. That was why it was set up.
Not all, some.
Some of it has.
What percentage?
Well, I don't know. I couldn't say.
I mean, you are the two, aren't you the two directors?
Yeah, the majority of it. The majority of it.
So the majority of the 800,000 has come from selling trademark products?
Products associated with his name, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Because that's the whole point of the company, right?
Yeah.
So what's happened to that money?
It has been used, some of it was used to look after Tom, looked after security, and trying to look to how we can build that in the future.
Right, but you've kept most of it, I guess.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
private income.
I want to ask you, first of all, where were you when you first heard about these attacks?
So I'd been in Israel for several weeks, and we had just gotten home to the United States on Friday morning. Friday night, obviously, is Sabbath for Orthodox Jews, and it also happened to be one of the biggest celebratory days of the year. Shmini Atzeres Simchat Torah was a 2-day, what we call a Yom Tov, which means no electricity. Really, you can't use your phone, you can't use your computer. My security team showed up at synagogue on Saturday morning and started informing me of what had happened, and then news was kind of bleeding throughout the day. There were various sources, maids who were leaving TVs on, for example, or my security team informing me throughout the weekend of what exactly was happening because of the serious security concerns that arise for Jews all over the planet when there's mass terror attack in Israel or anywhere else. And so we were finding out in a lagged time what exactly was happening. Obviously, we couldn't watch the videos. We couldn't see exactly what was happening until it came back online on Sunday night, and we're hit with the news that at that point, 700 Jews have been murdered today. That number has been totaled at well over 1,200 Jews have been murdered in Israel. We started to see all of the pictures on our TVs. I obviously, because I'm in touch with a lot of people on the ground, first responders, people on the ground in Israel, I started receiving extraordinary levels of footage and video and audio and pictures of what exactly had happened in these places. And these are images. I've been trying to show them to the audience for one very specific reason. And that specific reason is to understand what evil is, you have to look in the face of evil. And I think that we in the West have a peculiar narcissism that everyone thinks like we do, that we value children in a certain way. And so everyone values children in a certain way. That if somebody does something truly terrible or evil, it must be that there was something that, quote unquote, drove them to, it must be a policy question. But as it turns out, that is not the case, because there's literally nothing, I think, Piers, that could drive people in the West, a normal person, to go and to murder a baby in their crib in a civilian area, to simply walk in and gun down grandmothers, or to rape a woman and drag her back to the Gaza Strip. What could drive you to do that? I can't think of anything that would drive me to do that, but there are a lot of people who are not only driven to do that, but believe full well in the virtue of what they're doing. That is a different mode of thought, and that is not something you can negotiate with.
You've seemed about this, for completely understandable reasons, to have been more enraged than I think I've ever seen you, almost like a simmering volcano as you've talked about this. I want to play a clip from your Daily Wire YouTube channel. You have 6 million subscribers, and this is part of what was, I thought, a very powerful address that you made there.
I am a Jew. Those have been the words of the Jewish people for 3 millennia. Those were the words of the men, women, and children of Masada. Those were the words of the followers of Bar Kokhba. Those were the words of Jews in Granada in 1066 and the Rhineland in 1096, and Khmelnytsky from 1648 to 1657, and Kishinev in 1903, and Hebron in 1929. Those were the words of Jews in Auschwitz and Treblinka. Those were the last words of Daniel Pearl. And those are my words too. They're the words of my parents, the words of my wife, my children. Over the weekend, my people, the Jewish people, were attacked and murdered, mutilated. Our women were raped. Our children were kidnapped. This has happened millions of times before to millions of Jews across history. Jew hatred exists because evil exists, because there are people who have, for literally all of human history, hated the Jews and sought to strike at them while they are weak, who have blamed the Jews for their own problems, who have crafted complex conspiracy theories about the supposed power of the Jews, who have sought to destroy, to murder, to mutilate, to rape the Jews, from Pharaoh to Haman, from Hitler to Hamas.
What reaction have you had to that, Ben?
I think the reaction has been pretty strong and overwhelmingly positive. I think there are a lot of people, not only Jews, mostly my audience is people who are not Jewish, obviously, who understand the history of the Jewish people, who understand what it means when the greatest slaughter of Jews on a mass scale happens since the Holocaust, and who understand that it is inextricably linked to a history of anti-Semitism that goes back thousands of years. I mean, this extermination level anti-Semitism, what you see from Hamas, it's literally part of their charter. And so the attempt to treat them as a normal political body obviously is foolish. I think that a lot of people resonated to that. It's certainly the strongest I've felt about anything that had happened in my lifetime since 9/11, as an American, since 9/11. And as a Jew, obviously, I'm watching as people that I know, people I'm friends with, are getting called up to go to the military and serve in Gaza, try to protect the Israeli citizenry who are Jews and Arabs, who are Christians and Jews and Muslims. And I'm watching as there are people out there who are rallying on behalf of actual terrorist groups murdering children. I mean, it's an amazing, I would say, exposure of ignorance at best, and Jew hatred at worst.
I just want to start on a slightly serious note, but we can't ignore this extraordinarily sad, horrible story that's come out of Israel. What do you make of this?
Well, it's barbaric. I mean, it's one of the... I can't think of anything that has upset me more other than 9/11. And I don't really want to talk about it too much because I get upset. So if you want me to be crying during your show, go ahead.
No, I tell you, I myself choked up earlier reading this new revelation about 40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded. And I was like, how can any human being do that to a baby?
I don't know. I don't know. It's totally barbaric. It's not the sort of thing a human being does.
No.
It's an animal. And I just, I've been very upset ever since this happened. I've been watching all the news. I've been reading all the reports. And all I can say is that I, and everybody else, I'm sure, is just shocked and horrified. And I mean, do you remember 9/11?
Yeah.
Do you remember how... I mean, we heard all those stories all the time, and you remember where you were. I mean, I remember exactly where we were. And I think that, we'll remember this like you remember...
Well, you remember images. I mean, I remember at 9/11, the haunting images of people jumping out of the towers.
Oh, my God.
And when we realised what it was,
Yes.
just how everybody felt.
Yes.
And this time, that poor young girl who's being kidnapped from the music festival, and later you see her body, and then the grandmother who survived the Holocaust, and she's being taken away, and she's just sitting proudly and defiantly as they take her away to what? I mean, probably some horrific murder, and you think this woman survived the Holocaust.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it's beyond depravity.
Yeah, it is. It's barbarism. It's completely vile and hateful, and I can't think that anybody can possibly condone it in any way, shape, or form.
You can't if you have an ounce of
No.
humanity.
Yeah.
The Holly Willoughby story that's broken tonight.
Oh,
Jo.
Holly.
I mean,
Yes.
we know Holly really well.
Very
She's
well,
great
yes.
fun. She's a great
I
presenter.
know.
She's been through a rough old year anyway with the Philip
Yes.
Schofield scandal. But this is, again, a shocking story that somebody has now been charged with plotting to kidnap and murder.
And murder her and her children. Yeah. Well, I think this whole thing comes down to too much social media. Too many people she's there in your living room every morning for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
She's pretty, she's funny, she's cute. She's not too controversial, but I'm sure that occasionally she says something that is. And somebody gets attached to her, somebody thinks she's, that he can go after her. It's happened to lots of people in the public eye. It happened to me in a little way.
Did it?
Yes, I kept on getting these letters from this man who was in Sing Sing. And he said that he wanted to marry me.
Really?
And he sent me pictures of himself saying, I'm in for murder I didn't commit. Well, they always say that, don't they? And there was a picture of him naked lying on his bunk.
And he was a murderer?
Well, that's what he said, but he didn't do it. But this was many years ago when I was a pin-up girl, darling. I was a pin-up girl once.
You're a pin-up girl now, for some of us. But when you look at your career, has it changed, do you think, the nature of that kind of attention on particularly female stars, or was it always a bit of a problem?
No, it has changed. It's much, much more. Before, we had to watch out for the producers and the directors and some of the leading men and the CEOs and the heads of the companies and the guys who run the studio. Now you have to watch out for people on social media that are going to try and get you and attack you and say horrible things about you, because we're still human beings.
Yeah.
We don't like people to say nasty
But also,
things about
what's
us.
happened is, on social media, I like to express opinions, right?
Oh, you do?
By the way, so do you when we had dinner together. But I know you're careful on social media, and I know why. We talked about this, because the reaction can be horrible, right?
Yes, it can.
And many people feel cowed now into not wanting to express opinions. I found that so sad.
Well, cowed is not rather a nasty word. I think smart enough not to put yourself in the broiling pit of hatred and venom, which is what a lot of it is.
Right.
I mean, let's face it. I don't go on TikTok, although people are saying I've got to go on TikTok.
TikTok's big.
I know it's big. Yeah, that's the
Do you know, it's the
pictures
number
that
one
got
news
smoked.
source for kids under 21
Well,
in the world.
I'm not a kid under 21.
You look like you're not far off.
Yeah, sure.
Well, for more, I'm joined from Montreal by the evolutionary behavioural scientist and author, Professor Gad Saad. Gad, it's heartbreaking. I mean, as I came on air tonight, I heard the story of allegedly, it's not been completely verified, but there are soldiers reporting that in one village they found the corpses of 40 babies, some of whom have been beheaded. And we know that grandmothers who survived the Holocaust were dragged off and kidnapped, and God knows what's happened to them. These are unspeakable acts of depravity. What is your reaction to this?
Well, of course, I'm devastated by it, but frankly, not to sound flippant about it, it doesn't surprise me. For your viewers and listeners who may know me, I hail from Lebanon. We're Lebanese Jews. When I was 5 years old in 1970 in Lebanon, and Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, died, the way that the people on the street were mourning his loss was to have demonstrations singing death to Jews. What did the Jews have to do with the fact that the Egyptian president had just died? When I was in grade 4 and the teacher said, everybody stand up and say what you want to be when you grow up, one of my friends with whom I played soccer stood up and said, when I grow up, I want to be a Jew killer. When we left Lebanon to move to Canada during the Civil War, and the pilot had said that we are now out of Lebanese airspace, My mother put a Star of David around my neck and said, now you don't have to hide your identity and you can be proud of who you are. So this has nothing to do with colonialism and fighting for this piece of land or that piece of land. It's an existential battle where one group of folks don't believe that the other group has a right to exist there with self-determination. Once we get rid of that mindset, there could be peace.
I mean, I got to say, I don't think peace has ever looked further away in this conflict. I really think the scale of this atrocity is so appalling that it will demand probably a disproportionate response now from Israel. I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu will feel he has any choice but to hit Palestine harder than it's ever been hit. And of course, that will cause the deaths of many thousands of completely innocent people, many of whom may share a view that Hamas are a bunch of terrorists. And so it goes on. I just don't see how peace gets forged after this kind of thing.
I agree. Look, by nature, by disposition, I'm an optimistic person, but I get a lot of calls and emails from people saying to me, will there ever be peace? And I hate to admit, but I think I share your view. And again, it comes from the fact that there is one group of folks who do not believe that another group of folks have a right to self-determination. Sure, they can tolerate them. Sure, they could have them as second-class citizens, as dhimmis. That's an Arabic word for second-class citizen who's protected and tolerated, of course, until you're not. But they don't view the Jews as a people who are allowed to exist with their own individual nation, self-determination, autonomy. And until that is resolved, this is going to go on ad infinitum.
I want to play a clip now. This is from President Biden speaking just a few minutes ago in the United States.
That the United States stands with Israel. We will not ever fail to have their back. We'll make sure that they have the help their citizens need and they can continue to defend themselves. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people, full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering.
I mean, Gad, you know, strong words there from President Biden. It's taken him a few days to say them, I have to say. I guess the problem I have with this is Israel is going to go in, like I said, incredibly hard into Gaza. I imagine many thousands of people are going to die here. The situation in Gaza will simply get worse. It's already pretty intolerable for the 2 million people who live there, many of whom are young people who live really hopeless lives with very little chance of ever getting out, of living the dreams that most people have. You know, I understand on the Palestinian side why they have felt oppressed. I understand it. I don't think you can play whataboutery at this moment after this atrocity, and it doesn't excuse the appalling depravity that's been perpetrated by Hamas. But I do understand why people in Palestine feel oppressed. And I don't know how this resolves itself in the short to mid-term or indeed long-term. And I hate that feeling of helplessness about this.
Well, it resolves itself when your moral calculus is outraged whenever any innocent is butchered in any place, right? So when I watched videos of ISIS taking 1,500 Muslim men and putting bullets in their head, I was furious. I was angry. I didn't have a tribal calculus that says, I am Jewish, so who cares if ISIS kills Muslim men? So if I see a Palestinian child who is a complete innocent bystander in the war, who is, you know, blown up, I'm angry. By the same token, if you're seeing Holocaust survivors and Jewish babies being decapitated, then boy, is your moral compass broken if you can't garner a bit of kindness and sympathy for their plight.